Welcome back to the Prince Armory Academy. Recently, we've been working on our How to Make the Berserker Leather Armor series, and in our last video, we made the sabatons, which is armor that covers the feet. And in this video, we'll be working our way up to the Greaves, which are meant to cover the lower legs. These components are connected to each other, but you are also free to use each component as a standalone piece. This video is made with support from Weaver Leather Supply. We'll be using 9 to 10 ounce Weaver Select vegetable tanned leather, and you're welcome to use thicker or thinner leather according to your own goals and preferences. The patterns for this Berserker series come with PDFs that can be printed from home and scaled to any size. Then you can trace the paper patterns onto the leather and cut it out by hand. We now also provide SVG files so that you can cut the parts out with a laser instead. And if you don't have a laser, that's fine. Please check our previous tutorials to see the cutting process by hand. We've partnered with Eon Laser USA to help streamline our builds, and we'll be using the Nova 16 CO2 laser to make quick work of the cutting process for this project. This is an industrial-sized machine with plenty of room to put large sheets of material into the bed. I created the laser patterns to have multiple layers, with the top layer being the decorative cuts and reference marks. These will be set to a lower power and a faster speed. The next layer is for the internal cuts. This is where things like rivet holes and Chicago screw holes will get cut. The final layer is to cut all of the external lines, and this is normally where things would get really smoky, but I've also partnered with FilterBox, and I'm using their Expand X3 to keep our shop free of soot and smoke. If you have any questions about laser cutting, please leave them below because I'm planning a comprehensive guide that will be coming soon. I'll turn the parts over to Ashley for the next stages. Once all of the parts are cut, we'll need to wet the leather and prepare it for tooling and shaping. And when laser cutting, it's also good to scrub down the edges. One of the defining features of the Berserk suit is the raised ridges and creases throughout the armor, so I built a super handy leather fluting setup to save a lot of time. I also have a video coming out soon that will explain how you can build one of these for yourself, and guides will also accompany the series for how to achieve this effect by hand. All of the pieces get textured with the familiar striated texture as explained in previous videos. Each of the pieces will also have a little bit of shape added to them. Since the Greaves are split into so many pieces, a lot of the shape is already built into the design, and each piece only needs a slight bit of shaping, which can be done over a dome or other spherical object. Just try to keep in mind the final shape of the overall completed piece. You can even loosely pre-assemble the parts and shape everything together, which will make it much easier to intuitively understand the shape, and you won't have to individually keep track of all of the parts. To color the parts, as with all the other parts of the set, we'll be using Phoebing's Black Pro Oil dye. For the finish, we'll be using Weaver's Clear Tough Coat. Once the piece is dry, I'm opting to bring the gloss of the finish down a little bit, which can be achieved with a Scotch-Brite pad and sped up further with a small sander. As a bonus tip, I would suggest that you begin this assembly process before the parts are completely dried. If the parts are still a little damp, you can really dial in and finesse the shape while the acrylic finish is still drying. As always, most of the hardware and other materials we use in our videos can be found at Weaver Leather Supply. I really like their range of black hardware and will be using their double capped rivets and Chicago screws to put everything together. When you get ready to start your next build, please consider using the affiliate link in the video description below. Now we can move on to the assembly. You can look at the Greaves as being divided into two parts, the fronts, which are worn over the shins, and the backs, which cover the calves. But we'll actually start the assembly with the previously built sabatons. This step is not 100% mandatory though. You could instead let the Greaves ride loosely on top of the sabatons, but I think it will look better to connect it permanently. However, if you do need a little more mobility, you can experiment with disconnecting these components. I'll take part 8 and attach it to the retaining straps coming from the sabatons. You need to use a longer screw to go through the additional strap layers that connect to the sabatons. I'll be using a drop of glue into each Chicago screw hole to make sure they don't work themselves free. You can wait until your armor's finished and test fit before gluing up the screws, but don't forget to glue them up in the end. Next we can connect part B using the standard 1/4 inch Chicago screws. As a side note, you can ignore the extra holes in the bottom center sections. Those are there just in case additional retaining straps are needed, but I don't think it will be necessary. Moving on now to part C. And now to part D. If the Greaves look a little short at the moment, it's because the top piece of the Greave fronts, part E, is actually a transition piece that goes between the knees and the Greaves. You can see how the next plates will go together, but I'll cover that in detail in the next video. You can also start to see how the pieces will function and articulate. These designs are fairly precise, and it's normal for things to be very snug and tight at first. You can manually break in the leather a bit and soften it up at this stage, but be aware you'll naturally break it in just by wearing it. But it's also just fun to play with the articulations. Next we'll take the back portion of the previously made sabatons, and we'll join that with the lowest part of the backs of the Greaves, which is back part A. Start with the retaining strap. Then the sides will be attached with Chicago screws. Some of the holes are slotted to allow for a little extra mobility. The next part's attached with 2 rivets on each side. Here too, you can ignore the additional holes in the middle bottoms of each piece as they won't be necessary. If you need to, you can set the rivets flat from the backside with a hammer against any hard surface. But if you can find a spherical surface like this metal forming set from Pepe Tools, you can set the rivets normally with a setter. A foot press is also amazing for setting rivets on parts that have a lot of shape to them like this. You'll repeat the riveting process from A to E on the back components. When complete, the Greave should have a nicely formed shape, vaguely reminiscent of period armor. However, there are some design concessions to allow for modern footwear and garments, and of course accommodations to achieving the look presented in the source material. The client for this project sent his preferred footwear to build around, and when building your own set, we also suggest that you plan out your footwear and fit it accordingly. To make the Greaves wearable and to connect the fronts to the backs, I suggest doing a test fit with the boots and garments that you plan to wear with the suit. Don't underestimate how much bulk certain garments will add to the ankles. Then mark the outside of the legs with holes to permanently affix together with Chicago screws, and then on the inside of the legs, place a few buckle straps. I plan to attach all of the buckles for the full leg assembly at the same time, and I'll demonstrate this process there, so please continue with the next video in this series when you're ready.